Dirk, thank you so much. I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone for joining our first ever telephone town hall in our congressional office. It is a new format for me, and we decided that we were going to launch this way because it allows us to literally talk to thousands of people at the same time. But we have all kinds of other ways that we can keep you up to date with what's happening both in the district and in DC, and provide a pathway for you to be able to have some input. So there is a lot happening. And let me tell you, my first 3 months in office have been a bit of a whirlwind. We have staffed up, so we are really staffed in our DC and our district office. Our first district office we opened in Flint, and we have been hard at work. I have introduced legislation and co-sponsored bills alongside Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives. Our team so far, I think as of this morning, have closed 116 cases and constituent cases, and returned about $311,000 back to our district in the form of VA benefits, Social Security, et cetera. We know that the work that we do to be your voice in Washington, particularly when you're running into a snag with the federal government, is our most important thing. And so we are working hard at that. We have also held community events across the district, and I'm excited to tell you more. So wanted to just start by level setting a bit. We all know here in mid-Michigan that hard work is the core of how we define ourselves and where we take our pride. And we know that families are working harder and harder every year in order to pay for a good life. And listen, when I think about a good life for ourselves and our families, what I think about is being able to afford all the groceries we want and making sure that we can afford things like our prescription drugs and childcare and, maybe even a carton of eggs, right? But we also know that it's gotten harder and harder over the last several decades. So right now in mid-Michigan, 80% of our jobs pay less than $50,000 a year. That's just data from the Federal Department of Labor. And that is not enough to get by. So when I went to Congress, my goal was to work on that and really ensure that we were focusing on the issues that make it easier to live and raise a family and retire with dignity in the Great Lakes Bay Area. So the bills that I've introduced support senior Social Security, lower prescription drug prices, supporting our farmers, standing up to China, and many more things that I hear continuously across the district. So, I think that the big topic of conversation is what feels like chaos and unpredictability and confusion that's coming out of Washington. And it really is frightening people. I know that. I hear it all the time. We get literally thousands of calls into our DC and Flint offices every single week. And I have a lot of concern about what feels like the perspective and the desires of folks like Elon Musk coming before our families. So we see unpredictable and broad tariffs that are being proposed that I have a lot of worry will raise costs, and that concerns me. We are right now working under a pretty extreme budget blueprint proposal that slashes Medicaid by $880 billion and meal supports by $330 billion. And I want to be really clear that that is essentially intended to pay for tax breaks for people that make over $400,000 a year. And I'm very concerned. So when we hear Elon Musk saying that Social Security should be eliminated and suddenly are facing a closure of our Social Security office in Saginaw, I am very concerned. But there's a lot going on in DC, and I'm really excited to be able to work to find common ground on the other side of the aisle and with the administration on things that I know will help our communities. And when I see things that are happening that I know will hurt our communities, I'm standing up against them. So let me just say, I'm excited to talk more tonight about the things that are concerning you or that you'd like to see from our office and our government. The first thing that we did, knowing that there is a lot of conversation and a lot of worry about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, is asked an expert to come and be a part of this. So we've invited Wayne State University professor, Dr. Thomas Jankowski, to talk with us a bit about what he knows about Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, and what is happening now in terms of expected what could happen if these programs were cut. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jankowski.
Thank you, Congresswoman McDonald Rivet. I appreciate that very much. The Social Security program was signed into law in 1935, 90 years ago. Medicare and Medicaid were established 30 years later in 1965. Together, these three social insurance programs have been the most effective and successful anti-poverty programs in the history of the United States. Combined, they serve over 200 million Americans, touching nearly every family in our country. You may have heard otherwise, but these three social insurance programs are actually very efficient, with administrative overhead only a fraction of a typical private insurance company. But more importantly, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are critical to the health and well-being of the American people, and cutting them would create a humanitarian disaster in the United States. Take Social Security, which supports 68.5 million retirees, dependents, survivors, and people with disabilities, including over 200,000 people right here in Congresswoman McDonald Rivet's district, Michigan's 8th. Social Security alone keeps over 20 million older adults out of poverty. For example, our current elder poverty rate in Michigan is about 10%. About 10% of seniors live under the poverty level. If you took away Social Security, that would increase to about 40%. 4 out of 10 seniors would be living in poverty. So, and for over a third of retirees, Social Security makes up 100% of their income. They would have nothing if it were eliminated. Likewise, Medicare provides health insurance to 67.3 million people, including nearly 94% of the people aged 65 and over in this country. Like Social Security, it has dedicated sources of revenue, a payroll tax, and then in the case of Medicare, monthly premiums paid by recipients. And like Social Security, it is an earned benefit, not an entitlement. Both programs are self-funded, they are critically important to millions of people, and they must be protected. But I'm here today mostly to talk about Medicaid, because that is the program whose funding is most directly under threat at this time. Medicaid is the federal state health insurance program that covers about 79 million people with low incomes and low assets in the United States. But that includes 1 in 5 Americans. 20% of Americans receive their health care through Medicaid, including 40% of all children and over 40% of all people with disabilities. Medicaid also pays for over half of nursing home beds and over half of all long-term care services in this country. Fully 64% of Medicaid recipients currently work. Most of them work full-time. Those who do not work are primarily disabled or very ill, family caregivers, retired people, children, or young adults in college. Despite what you may have heard, there are very few unemployed, able-bodied, working-age adults on Medicaid. Here in Michigan's 8th Congressional District, about 225,000 people receive Medicaid. The most recent Republican budget resolution has set goals that cannot be accomplished mathematically without cutting Medicaid. In fact, if the entire $880 billion in cuts they've outlined are applied to Medicaid, 65,000 people in this district would lose their benefits, and local health care providers and hospitals would lose over $312 million in federal funding each year. Allowing the proposed Medicaid cuts to go through would not only endanger the health of tens of thousands of people in this district, it would cause tremendous damage to our community's health care system as well. So to wrap up, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are the most important programs run by our government, in my opinion, and they positively impact the lives of almost everybody in this country. Cutting any of them would cause a tremendous amount of pain and suffering and would lead to a lower quality of life for all Americans, including those of us right here at home. Congresswoman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jankowski. I mean, that's a really good information as kind of a base of reference. I know for me, a lot of people don't know that our Medicaid program covers end-of-life care. And, I lost my mom almost 40 years ago now, and it was Medicaid that paid for her hospice care at the very end of her life that allowed her to die at home in the way that she wanted to, surrounded by her family. So, these are really big things. I know that what we're hearing coming out of Washington can be really confusing because, again, there's just a lot of chaos happening and a lot of political drama taking place. But when the budget blueprint passed the House and headed over to the Senate, the $880 billion out of Medicaid was one of the most alarming pieces from my perspective because it not only would be a cut in the place of end-of-life care, but also almost half of the births in the state of Michigan are covered by Medicaid. And we've been working really hard on our maternal and infant mortality rates, which are unacceptably high, as well as extending obstetrics care, to our rural areas, and all of that is funded by Medicaid. So it can be a really scary proposition. What I'd like to be able to do now, so one of the tools that we're going to use, and we're going to give this a try because again this is a new format for us, is we're going to put in a poll question. Dirk, do you want to introduce our new poll question, our first poll question?
With pleasure, ma'am. So part of the technology, as the Congresswoman just mentioned, for this live telephone town hall, it allows us to get feedback from you, everyone listening in. You can use your telephone keypad to provide the answer to the following question. How important is it to protect programs like Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare when trying to balance the federal budget? If you feel it's extremely important, please press 1 on your telephone keypad. Somewhat important, please press 2 on your telephone keypad. Not very important, please press 3 on your telephone keypad. So again, the question that we're looking for your input on, how important is it to protect programs like Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare when trying to balance the federal budget? Extremely important, press 1. Somewhat important, press 2. Not very important, press 3. The number of people are keying in their response. Thank you very much for participating in that poll question. And when we open the call, we let you know if you have a question you'd like to ask on this call. All you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. So again, to ask a question live on this call, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And we've got Pat on the line with us right now. Hello, Pat. You are live. What is your question?
Hi, yes. I'm a senior citizen and I live in Saginaw County. And I'm alarmed to find out that our office in Saginaw could be closing because of all these cuts. I do have mobility issues. I can drive short distances, but to get me to another city is going to be difficult. And it's just alarming how they're just cutting out services. I'm also not very good on the computer. So I usually need a teenager to maneuver that. So having an office nearby is just very important to me.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I thank you for the question, and I know how scary this can be. I laugh because I've got a teenager in my house, but when I ask him for help, he rolls his eyes at me. So that may not be a good option either. We found out about the potential closure of the office, the Social Security office in Saginaw, because it was put up on a website and then taken down very quickly, and are having trouble getting much information. We do know that the administration has targeted it under the heading of cost savings for it to be closed and the building sold off. And I know having with my own parents and also just having to deal with Social Security myself in a different way, that it's that personal contact because it's a complicated system. It's very difficult to navigate. And so we we sent a letter to the GSA, the Government Service Administration, asking for answers of what they intend to do, how services are going to be delivered in a city that they've abandoned and eliminated in-person service. It's alarming, and I would tell you that we're fighting it with every tool that we have. I think that after a lifetime of paying in to Social Security, it should be there for you. It should remain whole, and you should be able to get assistance in being able to navigate it or have questions asked or work out bugs in the system, which happen fairly frequently. So we're doing everything in our power to keep that building open.
Looks like our next question is going to come from Ray. Ray, you're live on the call. What's on your mind, sir?
Hi, Congresswoman. I'm driving home. I'm from Frankenmuth Township. But yeah, I wanted to join the call to hear about the Medicaid cuts. My girlfriend's workplace is a lot of Medicaid, like funding for healthcare. She's on a lot of pills and things like that. I was wondering your thoughts about the Republican cuts. Like, is that true, or like kind of like what that looks like? We're trying to plan for the future, so just wanted to hear about that today and what it means.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So, the budget process in Congress is really complicated, but the first thing that we have done is passed what we call the budget blueprint. And it's attempted, and it was put forward with an objective of cutting programs in order to pass a $4 trillion tax cut package, primarily aimed at corporations and people who make over $400,000 a year. But one of those cuts calls for $880 billion that is likely to come out of the Medicaid program if it's passed. Now, Medicaid is one of those programs that you'll hear people say, well, let's eliminate the fraud. Let's put a work requirement on it. Let's get rid of all the inefficiencies. And you know what? We need to get rid of fraud and inefficiencies. But there is no way you can do it you can focus only on that with $880 billion worth of cuts. I voted no on that and am continuing to fight alongside many other people who understand that our mental health services in our communities, our care for a lot of our seniors, our cares for pregnant women and our youngest kids are generally coming from Medicaid. And we need to hold that harmless as we look to balance the budget, but we sure as heck can't be cutting Medicaid in order to cut the corporate income tax.
So don't forget, the Congresswoman and her staff put out a very informative newsletter. It comes out very frequently, and it'll keep you up to date. You can get signed up for that during this call by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. Again, get signed up to receive the Congresswoman's newsletter by pressing *6 right now. We're heading out to Flint next, and we've got John joining us on the line. Hi, John. You're live on the call. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, Congresswoman. My question is, it seems kind of broad, but with the talk about cuts to Social Security and things like that, and a lot of it is coming from Elon, I'm curious what is being done, if anything, to put the brakes on him basically controlling our government at this point. It's really troublesome, and I'd really like some answers if you could. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. I understand your concern. Let me just start by saying I'm fighting in every place I can to make sure that he doesn't get anywhere near Social Security. We've all seen the images on the stage of Elon Musk holding the chainsaw and kind of running around in a dramatic way. First of all, I would like to say we all know that he wasn't holding the chainsaw correctly. That's not how you do it. But secondly, let me say that I think it's really difficult for the world's richest man to understand the importance of a number of these programs that he is cutting. And what he's really doing is going in, gaining access to information and cutting without any sort of filter for how to do it or why to do it. And I say that because, the idea, and I'll say this over and over again, I do think that there are efficiencies that have to happen in our government. And I do think that it is possible to cut it down. But just indiscriminately laying off big swaths of people, everybody who is been hired in the last 2 years, meant that we were laying off really important people. So we've laid off half of the staff at the Social Security Administration, half of the staff at the Department of Education, completely eliminated most of our research capacity within places like the USDA, which does research on things in our farm area, and our education department that does research on how to improve our math and reading scores, which are some of the lowest in our country's history. All of those things have just been indiscriminately cut. And additionally, we have seen people that are intended to safeguard, to make sure that we stay safe, right? So people that have been newly hired in the last 2 years at places like air traffic control, suddenly losing their job. These sorts of cuts to personnel are concerning, but it's also the cuts where big pieces of the government that people are relying on are just being completely stripped out. So, it is really, really concerning. Another thing that Elon Musk is doing that is really alarming is the proposed digitizing of all Social Security claims, which would completely get rid of all in-person and telephone services. So I know that if you put everything on a computer, I can tell you that my dad would have a great deal of trouble navigating, and many of our seniors would as well. So it's important that people speak up and make their voices heard. We have to raise awareness in our community about how these cuts that you see coming from DOGE and the administration are impacting our community. And really, really focus on this. But I can tell you that I am using every tool in my toolbox in DC to be able to raise awareness, contain the work that he's doing, and stop as much as possible.
Just a little bit ago, we asked a poll question, and I'd like to provide the results to that. An overwhelming majority, 97% of those that responded, feel it's extremely important to protect programs like Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare when trying to balance the federal budget. The remaining 3% fell down to 2% said somewhat important, while 1% said not very important. So everyone that participated in that first poll question, thank you very much for doing that. And I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, to indulge me with another one. Please use your telephone keypad to reply. Question is, do you think Elon Musk and DOGE employees should have access to your private information, like your Social Security number and bank information? Feel the answer to that is yes? Please press 1. Feel it's no? Please press 2. If you're unsure, please press 3. So again, we're looking for your input on this question. Do you think Elon Musk and DOGE employees should have access to your private information, like your Social Security number and bank information? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no, press 3 if you're unsure. You folks are keen in their response. Thank you very much for participating in that question. Let's get back to the phones now. We've got Pamela joining us from Bay City. Pamela, you are live with Congresswoman Kristen McDonald Rivet. What's on your mind?
Hello.
Yes. Ma'am. Go right
Hi,
ahead.
Pamela.
Hi. I just wanted to know, as a citizen, I also receive Social Security. I'm very concerned about the people that receive Medicare and Medicaid. What do we do? What do we do to help out you as much as possible? What do we do?
Yeah. So, Pamela, thank you for calling in, and thank you for your concern with everybody in the community. I share your concern. So, first, like I was saying, it's important to make your voices heard both in Congress and just across the community. So from our office, I really believe, and I've spent my career at the community level doing this, that it's one thing for people to hear about a cut. It's another thing for people to hear how that cut will impact someone in particular. So if you're concerned about your cuts and you want to tell your story, we're trying to put names and faces on these cuts so that it's very clear that these are human beings, right? And there's a space on our website to be able to do that. It's also, we live in a democracy. We still live in a democracy, and your voice has power. Our country was set up that way. So would encourage you to actually call your other elected officials, make your voice heard in that way. Call the White House switchboard. Tell them that you do not want Social Security cut, and be as loud as you can. But the other piece is, as we look to places like another place that is where you invest your time and your resources. So right now I'm really, really concerned about hungry children. So I think, as you know, I've got 6 kids of my own, but I've spent my entire career working on systems for kids and families. So what we have seen happen just in the last 3 weeks is our local food banks have seen a freeze in their federal operating grants. So that's the money they use to keep their building open, pay their staff, pay for their heat. Those grants were frozen. The second thing that came was $1 billion worth of cuts 2 weeks ago to the food programs to our local schools. And then lastly, in this budget bill, this budget blueprint that passed, $300 billion worth of cuts to SNAP benefits, which are our food stamps. It's our supplemental nutrition for people who are financially struggling. So if you put all those 3 things together, what we really end up with when you look at the data, because most of those programs go towards feeding kids, you see a lot of really hungry children across our country. And there is a place where we need to stand up and talk about our values. And there is not a cut in the world that is worth a child going hungry at night, in my view. And so when we look at cuts like Social Security, food programs, healthcare programs, we have to politically lean in, but also, for folks who are the kind of folks that donate in a community, donate to your local food bank. People are really going to suffer under this budget, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable. And I think that that's incredibly important. So whether we're talking about vet programs, food services, volunteering with a local organization that's trying to fill the gap while we write this in Congress is also a really good thing to do.
I want to take a moment and thank everybody for connecting into this live telephone town hall with Congresswoman Kristen McDonald Rivet. As we mentioned from the beginning, if you've got a question that you would like to ask, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. And also don't forget, during this event, you can get signed up for the Congresswoman's informative e-newsletter by pressing *6. We're back to the phones. We've got Jerry joining us from Midland. Jerry, you are live. Go ahead now. Hello, Jerry. This occasionally happens as we do have Jerry, are you with us? Oh, looks like we've lost, as I was about to say. As people do hang on for a few minutes, I do ask you to please continue to hold on. We will be working diligently to get for everybody who has a question. We're going to move on now to Robert in Flint. Bob, are you with us? Hello.
Yes, I am.
Sir, you are live on the call. Please go right ahead with your question.
With Trump's tariffs pretty much unavoidable, what are you going to do to ensure that the jobs that are going to be moving from China and the EU and stuff like that, with us not buying as much from them, that those jobs come to the Flint area?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I just want to start by saying this on tariffs. I don't think they're all inevitable, which is why you see tariffs being imposed and then pulled back and then imposed again, and there seems to be a lot of back and forth. And I do think that there is a strategic place for tariffs in our national strategy, but the whole-scale approach to tariffs, particularly looking at our friends over in Canada, are particularly concerning. So I think that we have to have a conversation, a national conversation about when we use tariffs strategically that will bring jobs into our country and specifically into our communities, such as Flint and Saginaw, in Bay City. But not in the way it's being done now, and not in this whiplash mode of on again, off again. But we have seen that pressure on the tariff does in fact work, and that is why some of the tariffs have been rolled back. But let me just talk about jobs, particularly in the Flint area. When we look across the district, whether we're talking about Midland, Dow, with Dow, but Midland, Hemlock, Flint, Bay City, these are places where there have really benefited from the investments in what's called the CHIPS Act, right? That allows us to take microchips, the things that were, you saw all of those cars lined up during the pandemic because all of our chips have to come from China, and they're in everything that we have. There's been an effort, the CHIPS Act was put forward in a bipartisan way to be able to start building those things right here. And it doesn't just build those things right here in the United States or even in Michigan. Those things are being built in this region. So one of the things that I think is really important and, has the potential to bring tens of thousands of jobs right into our district alone is to continue the investments in the CHIPS Act. And other innovations that, we have this history as a country of inventing things and then selling it to China, and they end up making all of the pieces and selling them back to us. We've got to figure out how to stop that. And the way to do that is by making them right here. So I think that is the number one priority to be able to bring jobs to Flint and other places is preserving the CHIPS Act, as well as protecting the dollars that were a part of the Infrastructure Act that are helping us replace our bridges and our roads across the district. Those are really good union jobs that are building those things. And as a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I'm going to fight really hard to make sure that we keep getting those investments in our district.
So throughout this call, we're asking some poll questions, and everybody's been so kind to reply to them. Our last question we asked, do you think Elon Musk and Doge employees should have access to your private information, like your Social Security number and bank information? A resounding 95% of those that replied said no, 4% said yes, and 1% were unsure. So again, thank you very much for taking the time to answer that poll question. And since we're on sort of a streak here, I'm going to ask another one. So please use your telephone keypad to respond to this question. How concerned are you that the administration's tariffs will raise prices for you? If you're very concerned, press 1. Somewhat concerned, press 2. Not concerned, press 3. So again, we are looking for your response to this question. How concerned are you that the administration's tariffs will raise prices for you? If you're very concerned, press 1. Somewhat concerned, press 2. Not concerned, press 3. A number of folks are keying in their reply. Thank you very much for taking part in that poll question. And let's get back to the phones. Another quick reminder, if you have a question you'd like to ask live on this call, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad. So we got a question now from Paul. Paul, you are live on the call. What is on your mind, sir? Hello, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sir, you are live with the Congresswoman. Go ahead, please.
As far as Social Security goes, I don't know if I'm misinformed or what, but is it not our money? And how can they gain access to our money?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, it is your money, and you've paid into it for since your very first job. What we're working to do is to protect that. So I completely agree with you. It cannot be viewed as an entitlement program. It is not an entitlement program. It's money that you paid into that comes back to you when you're in retirement, which is why I completely oppose any cuts to Social Security. I oppose any changing of the rates to Social Security. You should be able to gain access to it, and are rightfully outraged that there are people who believe that not only can we look to Social Security to balance the budget, but are intending to close local offices that are providing direct services and contact with people who are receiving Social Security.
So, Congresswoman, we have a question submitted from Alan, who picked this up online, who opens his message. Congresswoman, I was a first-time voter in November, having just turned 18 last June. I'm entering adulthood, and things keep getting more expensive and more terrifying. What are your plans to protect mid-Michiganders from what's happening around us?
So, Alan, let me just say congratulations and on voting for the first time. And we are more and more seeing young adults making a decision not to vote after they turn 18. And so I'm just incredibly grateful that you are leaning into our democracy. So it's not enough for us to, we've been talking a lot about the things that we're going to fight and the things we're worried about, but it's also important that we look forward to optimistically with what's possible for our country. So in order to be able to, I have 5 adult kids. I still have one at home, but of my 5 adult kids, only one of them owns a home right now. And what they talk to me all the time is how difficult it seems for them to be able to buy a house or even find a place with rent that they can live without, 7 roommates, affording groceries. And the reason for that has very much to do with a really frozen salaries, right? People, our prices are increasing faster than our paychecks, and we really have to focus in the spaces that, one, start to bring more high-wage jobs into mid-Michigan. That is really important, which is the stuff that I talked about in terms of the projects through with our bridges and our roads, but also making chips that are the technology of the future, and quite literally brings tens of thousands of very high-wage jobs. But also, it's important that when we're looking at the tax code, when we're trying to make a decision, hey, who gets a tax cut? Where do we focus our efforts? It's got to be on the people that are making less than $100,000 a year. Those are people who need more money in their pockets in order to afford very basic things like, the price of a hamburger, not just the price of eggs, but milk and hamburger and chicken. Very expensive. I see that every week when I'm at the grocery store with my husband. So, the best way to do that is like when I was in the state senate, I authored the largest tax cut for working families in Michigan's history, because I think it's really important that we provide tax credits and tax breaks like the expanded child tax credit, like the earned income tax credit, things that will put more money in your pockets while we're retooling our economy and bringing the wages up in our region, which is incredibly important.
Don't forget, you can get signed up to receive the Congresswoman's informative e-newsletter by pressing *6 anytime during this call. Again, get enrolled and stay informed by pressing *6 right now. And we're heading out to Saginaw. We've got Jeffrey on the line with us. Hi, Jeffrey. You are live. What's your question?
Hello. Hi, Congresswoman. I work in the mental health field. I work at a clubhouse facility where we teach our members independent living skills. We get them jobs. We take them to and from. And actually, Michigan has the largest mental health clubhouse community in the country. And through our work, we keep 85% of the people that come through our program stay out of hospitalization. It's the kind of one of those offshoot mental health programs that you don't hear about, but it does a lot of work, and a lot of people are scared about getting their Medicaid cut. What are some ways that people in the mental health community can, not only quell the storm for our consumers, but make ourselves known that this Medicaid.
Looks like we just lost him, but I think we've got pretty much the question. Do you have that, Congresswoman?
I did. I do. I think it's programs like that are actually saving money in the Medicaid system. So really important to preserve. Wanted to see, Dr. Jankowski, if you did a lot of talking here, wondering if you want to weigh in on that since this is a space of your specialty.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. A lot of the type of services that were just described, mental health services, keep people out of the hospital, which is extremely expensive when people go into the hospital. So programs that are preventative like that, actually save more dollars than they cost. And I also wanted to just jump in real quickly and mention that, I understand the desire to cut waste in government, but the Social Security Administration is not the place to do that. Social Security, even before these most recent cuts, they were at a 50-year low in employment at the same time that they're sending out more checks now than they ever have in history due to the retirement of the baby boomers. So Social Security was already cut to the bone. To cut it anymore is going to necessarily result in poorer service.
Thank you for that. I wonder if there's a way that we can.
I apologize.
Sorry, Derek. I wonder, Doctor, if there's a way that we can think about incentive. Actually funding more of these prevention programs that help keep people out of the very expensive parts of our healthcare system. I mean, it just feels like more and more we're losing those prevention programs, which doesn't seem to make any fiscal sense to me.
Right. And in Michigan, for example, when it comes to long-term care, we still have a lot of people in nursing homes who would prefer to be at home and could receive in-home services, but we've sort of tipped the balance in favor of institutional care when 98% of people would much rather be at home. And that would save, and it's quite a bit cheaper, and it prevents people from going into the hospital. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's just these common sense things that we just need to spend more time implementing and frankly funding, because it just saves everybody money in the long run. It makes people happier and healthier.
Exactly.
Moving on to our next caller, we've got Leona joining us on the line. Hello, Leona. What are you thinking about this evening?
Well, hi, Senator Kristen McDonald. I've met you several times, and I'm the national chairwoman for the American GI Forum. And so one of the questions I have, it has to do with Social Security, but it also has to do with our veterans, because so many of our veterans right now are living, on just what they're getting. And now for this to be cut off for them and their Social Security, I really see some issues here because, a lot of our veterans are still homeless in the street. So I feel a lot of them are going to go back to the streets because this is a really serious issue.
Thank you, Leona, for calling in. I do remember meeting you. Listen, when we started hearing about these cuts to veteran services, and then, I'm sure you know about the vet who was fired from the VA in Saginaw. It defies logic and it breaks your heart, right? We know that there people who have given so much to the country, and then for us to turn our backs on them after they're out of service is completely unacceptable. I do think, additionally, we have making a lot of noise in Congress and really pushing back on the administration on the number of our military vets that have been fired as a part of the mass firing of federal employees. Many of those folks are veterans, and part of the reason is that there was a bipartisan bill passed that actually encouraged in the last couple of years the hiring of our veterans into public employment. So then suddenly you got Elon Musk coming on board, and he starts firing everybody with a limited number of years of service, and that ended up being a lot of our veterans. Unacceptable, completely unacceptable. But we need people to use their voices and push back, and again, talking to your neighbors, talking in the community, reaching out to the media, calling the White House switchboard, really registering, and then, of course, through our website, loudly, the importance of making sure that our veterans are well cared for and receive good, strong health care, and that the programs that serve our veterans in housing, because you're right, we have a lot of homeless veterans who are struggling not just with housing but with mental health issues. That these are things that are core to who we are in our values as Americans, and we need to honor that.
So as we continue on with our polling questions, and I've got to say, this is a great and tremendous turnout and response. We've connected to some over 6,500 constituents that have been on the line here and are participating, and thank you for everyone that's doing that. Moments ago, we asked the question, how concerned are you that the administration's tariffs will raise prices for you? 91% of those that responded are very concerned, 7% somewhat concerned, and 2% not concerned. So additively, folks with concern on their mind about the tariffs, 98%. Let's move on to the next question, if you'll indulge me again. Please use your telephone keypad to respond. What issues are you most concerned about? If it's the economy, press 1. Healthcare, press 2. Immigration, press 3. Education, press 4. Democracy, press 5. Something other or else, please press 6. Again, looking for you and your feedback on this question. What issues are you most concerned about? The economy, press 1. Healthcare, press 2. Immigration, press 3. Education, press 4. Democracy, press 5. Something other, press 6. The people are keying in their response. Thank you again for doing that. And let's get back to a question. We've got Pastor Thompson on the line with us. Pastor, you are live on the call. Go ahead with your question.
Hi. First, I would like to say thank you to Congresswoman. You have given our community, Genesee County, Flint, and Flushing, a lot of hope. And we thank you for what you're doing for our community. I do want to say that there's a lot of people in the community of Flint where I serve as pastor who is very concerned about Medicaid and Medicare due to what has happened to us in the past, which was the water crisis. A lot of people are still suffering, and the water is not fixed. Many people have found out that there was more than just lead in the water, but there is PFAS and other contaminants. We are concerned about the government being able to be concerned about the city of Flint, as we know you are, and you have been working so hard and diligently, and thank you.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you for the work that you do. I know you get up every day and you fight for residents in Flint. So I really want to be clear that everything feels pretty scary right now. And, you know, when we look at the cuts in Medicare and the potential cuts to Medicare and Medicaid and the dialogue about Social Security, it can feel really overwhelming. But we've been through times like these before. I can understand why people in your church are feeling betrayed, particularly in Flint, because of course they are. But let's not forget that our voices really matter. And in the history of our country, raising voices at ordinary people, everyday people, raising our voices, pushing back, saying no, this is not going to happen, have turned the course of history. So, we are doing a number of things. But just for instance, in the first 2 months since President Trump's inauguration, over 120 court challenges have been filed regarding regarding the executive orders that just do not align with our Constitution. Right? They've been able to address the attacks on birthright citizenship, the firing of our inspectors general, who are the people, by the way, who watch government to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and help root out fraud. We have fought back on that. The pausing of of the funding that Congress passed to say these are the things that we want to be funding, and then we're just completely frozen by the federal government. All of those things have been challenged in court, and guess what? We have been able to be successful in a lot of them. So we're making progress. So a lot of the cuts that we are talking about, there's some things that have already happened. The cuts to our local food banks, the $1 billion of cuts to our school district of food that feeds our kids. Those things have already happened, but the budget has not yet passed. And, we should always remember the power of our voices, the power of our communities speaking up. And sometimes that is done in a prayer on Sunday. And sometimes it is a phone call, and sometimes it is a march in the streets. But when we're looking at how we care for our kids and our senior citizens and our veterans, this is a line that cannot be crossed. So thank you for raising that. And also just to remember how much power actually exists in this country in a single person's voice.
Congresswoman, looking at the clock, we need to look at winding this down, but I want to make sure that we get in one more question. This one comes from Karen. She submitted it online, and she states, what can we as constituents do to fight back against this lunacy? Specifically, we've got your back.
Thank you, Karen. That is incredible. So I just want to start with just a thank you for the thousands of people who had just decided to listen in for an hour on a Tuesday night, so that we can have a bigger conversation about what is happening and the vision for what we think is important. It does feel like, I think you said lunacy, but it does feel like chaos. It feels a little like craziness on a regular basis, and I don't know that anybody anticipated that this is what this was going to look like. But here we are. This is what we have. But we also know that there is still a legislative process. Congress still moves bills. We have hearings. We're holding town halls. We are holding roundtables all across the district, several of them, introducing legislation and trying to get out and talk to as many people as possible, because we have thousands of people who depend on us. And yes, they depend on me, but they also depend on all of us to stand for what we know is important. And we also know that it is possible in this country to hold our values of protecting our most vulnerable and moving towards a future where we have strong public schools and it's possible to retire with dignity and not have to worry about the cost of drugs and housing and medicine and all of those things. All of those things are possible. But it's important that we are pushing on the things that we think are damaging, but also working toward the positive things that we know are possible. So, just joining in this call tonight really matters. As you see things, if you subscribe to our newsletter, look to our website, we will be posting ways that you can get involved and things that you can do that will help raise your voice. And know that in Washington, I am working to stop as much of this as we possibly can, because what I do know is that the hard work and values of people in this district and across mid-Michigan are what our country was built on. And I actually have faith that, it's going to be a bumpy next couple of years, but if we stand up for these really important programs and reject the kinds of cuts that are being proposed, that we can be successful in that. And I believe that because we've done it in the past and because we are having success in the courts. And so it's going to be a slog. It's every single day. We get up and we push back and we push toward the future that we know is possible. But the good news is none of us are doing this alone. We're all doing this together as thousands of people, not just across our district, but across the country, to make sure that Medicaid, Social Security, our public schools, our veteran programs, all of those things are made whole and protected.
So, Congresswoman, I hate to admit it, our final poll question, I'm not quite finished doing the tally here. So while I continue to use my fingers and toes, I'd like to ask if you have any closing thoughts for us.
Yeah, I think I know that there are thousands of people on this call, and so everybody didn't get to be able to ask a question. But we've heard from brand new voters, veterans, senior citizens, and people that are just really invested in our communities. And so I hear you. Protect these programs, and really, I also have heard throughout this hour that people are really hungry for an opportunity to use their voice, to use their actions, to be able to make sure that we are living in the America that we all value. And we will do our very best to heed that call and to make sure that we are posting opportunities and continuing to do these places where you can ask your questions and express your opinion and have a say in what is happening as we go forward. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in.